everyone. Welcome to The Creek. My name is Jared Miller, and I'm so glad that you're joining us today. Today, I'm joined in the Creek conversation by Alex Douglas, who is the lead family pastor at Family Church of Heritage Green in Stoney Creek, Ontario, just outside of Hamilton. So, Alex, welcome to The Creek.
Thanks. It's good. Big Creek brothers. You guys are the Calgary Creek. We're out here in Ontario Creek. So
Absolutely.
It's all good. Yeah.
I just find all the towns in Ontario that have creek something in their name.
It's a very limited list. Not a lot of variety in what we talk about, but it's exciting. Yeah.
It's entirely creek related conversations.
Awesome.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about tell us. We've been chatting for a little bit, but tell us who you are. Give us a sort of a rundown of what it is that you guys do at Family Church.
Sure. Well, Family Church, their history is it's a short one, in that Family Church of Heritage Green is only about 6 years old. The church that it was rebirthed out of, or replanted out of, is the term that we use, was about 20 years old at the time. So Hamilton at that time was going through a real booming growth, much like Calgary. And so back when the city used to consider where churches were, they actually came to the mainline denominations and said, we want to put one of you in each of these areas. And the Presbyterians drew this area where we are, the Stoney Creek Mountain area. And mountain. It's not nearly as impressive as you guys out west, but it's what we have. It's an escarpment, basically.
You Easterners and your mountains.
That's right. Our mountains. Our creek is actually just a trickle too. It's not even as impressive as your creeks. But so this church was planted here under the expectation that the area would grow around it and the church would be here to minister to them. Well, that happened. The area has exploded and continues to. We have, I think, in the next 5 years, they're anticipating another 10,000 homes in this area. So it's nuts. And as God ordained, this church is right smack in the middle of it. We have real estate we are so blessed to have just off the main drag, and space that downtown churches in our even in our presbytery. The church I ministered at before, which was 10 minutes away from here, had 5 parking spots. And we have a parking lot that's big enough to set up a hockey rink in and still have room, or a farmer's market, both of which we've done. So we have we have space, and it's such a blessing. But through a sad and intense couple of years, a lot of heartache, the founding pastor passed away right before the building opened. A number of ministers after that went through some personal crisis, and the church as well. And so fast forward 20 years, and the church was about 12 people on a Sunday morning, really surviving solely off of the daycare that was renting out the CE wing. And, that's not the witness that any of us desire to be. And they really wrestled with that of how do we minister when all we're trying to do is survive. That was really at the forefront of everything that they were doing, was how can we make money to stay open? How do we keep going? And around this time, as I said, I was ministering at another church nearby, and really feeling as though a time of transition was coming. I'd been there for 6 years, and took a day of retreat. And as as I'd been encouraged to do, but had never done before, to spend some time listening. Brought some food with me, unplugged the fridge in the room where I was staying, even took the battery out of the clock. I was just trying to just be still and be with God, which is not something that I do regularly or do easily. And but amazing things happen when we do, and God put this mission on my heart. I wish I could say if it was audible or just in my mind. I really don't know. I think that's a reflective of how God can speak to us sometimes. But it was so clear. It was Heritage Green, replant, and family. And I knew of Heritage Green. I'd driven past it as a means of avoiding traffic before, but I didn't know anything about the church. Replanting was not a concept I was aware of. But I did know about family ministry. It was something that I'd been exploring quite a bit. I was blessed to be a part of a network of family ministry people across Canada and the US through David C. Cook, and do some amazing work with some incredible leaders in that time. And so on my heart was this idea of, what's family ministry? Typically it's an add-on to what's already happening, a department, a series of events that we do, maybe a podcast or something. But what it really needs to be is our focus, that as a church, we're called to be family. As a faith community, we're called to be family. When we look at scripture, that's what church is called to be. And so the piece that I was discerning out of that conversation with God was that this church was going to be replanted because its purpose was still good, but it had lost its direction or lost some momentum. And so this church would be replanted with a family focus. And so that became the start of this mission that we're on. We became a ministry that was supportive through grants in the denomination, in our presbytery. And all the while at the center of this was this, it started off as a half page and became eventually a 30-page proposal of how to go about doing this. Because our denomination doesn't replant churches. In fact, we haven't really been planting churches very much recently, but we're getting back into that practice of how we could make this the direction for our church. And so this church was replanted in July of 2014 with myself and a colleague from school, David Moody, as the replanting pastors. We were both full-time. So this was a church that had no pastor before, now had 2 full-time pastors. And with some capital to make some really much needed improvements in the building, a dumpster to get rid of some of the unneeded things that were in the building, and a lot of ideas. And that's kind of the cool thing, that we had the mission to be unapologetically family focused. That was our call, was like, look, this is what we're going to do. And we're going to do it, and we're not going to apologize for that. And so let's figure out what that looks like, because that was the other daunting thing. Apart from weekend exercises, events, series for a message, there was no model to follow in terms of what family ministry looks like all the time. And if you try to make it just a special event every Sunday, it gets stale pretty quick. And so we began this process of figuring out, what does weekly worship look like? What are the tent poles that you need in order to be a family-focused church? And that's kind of the journey that we've been on for the last 6 years.
That's really cool. Like, I love that the way you put that, though. That, like,
when we're focused on survival, it's really hard to think about what ministry can look like.
Yeah.
And like the church for the last 4 months has broadly sort of been trying to ask that question. Like,
yeah.
we've been sort of in this almost dual state where we've been really sort of like, okay, we have to learn all this stuff now. We have to figure out what does it look like to sort of be online, and how do we reach people when we're not doing that. But at the same time, we've started to call into question all the things we were doing before, and saying, okay, this is a new world we live in. This is like this kind of idea of, there's not many churches that I know that are like, no, we're good. We're full of families. We don't need any more.
Yeah.
We got our compliment.
No, we're good. We're full. Good. Yeah.
And so, like, how has that focus on families kind of found animation for you? Yeah. And like, even for you, and you have a large family yourself. So how has that kind of played out with in sort of real terms?
Yeah. Well, the way that it sort of was birthed, to keep the family thing going, was sort of, the idea that I think we needed to try something different. And not even necessarily, and I use the word different, not new, because the idea of ministering to families is like a second book of the Bible idea. It's very present in Deuteronomy. Like, it's not, or that's third, sorry, I know my Bible, but it's a very, very Old Testament idea, and it's not a new way of doing ministry. I think we need to reclaim it. And it's the idea that we take the things that we know and do as families in a whole host of ways and actually apply them to our faith. when we look at the things that we get from our parents, from our grandparents, it's not from sitting back and observing. It's not from being in a different room all the time. And yet that's the way, especially we as Presbyterians, we're largely doing, we're expecting our faith to be passed on to the coming generations, that it was work done by other professionals. So you hire a children's pastor or a youth pastor, and they're the ones that will take care of those things. Being done in separate rooms. So, either you're there for a little bit and then you have a moment and then you leave, or you're gone altogether. But then magically, when you turn 16, you're supposed to have full ownership of the mission of the church and join back in and have no questions and be fully in step with the rest of the adults who've been learning in a way that's different from you and separate from you and probably using different words than you. And so we kind of took that approach to worship of saying, like, okay, if we're family, and it was so helpful to be in that phase ourselves. At the time this church started, we had 2 kids. We now have 4. Twins will do that. But they've always been my grounding point to say, will my kid get this? And not as a PK, but just like, not just as the pastor's kid, but will a 6-year-old understand what we're talking about? And so everything went through that filter of, is this how I would teach my kids soccer? Is this how I would teach my kids about cooking? Is this how I would, and taking that same model and applying that to church. And so saying, before we do communion, is there anything we're saying or doing that implies a knowledge that isn't there, right? You wouldn't put your kid on the counter and say, okay, 6, here's a big knife, here's a clove of garlic. I need you to I need you to fine chop that for me, and then just walk away, right? Or assume that they would understand what you mean, right? Or and what we're going to do next, sweetheart, we're going to put this in a pot and it's going to ferment. Okay, moving on, right? Like what's the first thing the kid says is, well, what's ferment? Right? And then you have to explain it. And so we do a lot of funny things in church. I once heard it said by a common acquaintance, Jen DeCombe, said the term, that churches make normal things weird and we make weird things normal. And I thought, like, wow, Jen, hit the nail on the head. Like, that's so what we do. We just throw around words that nobody uses anywhere else in life. And most adults don't explain or understand. We just take them, oh, well, the minister said it, therefore it's holy. All right, moving on. Transubstantiation, you got it. Yep, amen, brother. But like to a child, like if you don't give them the building blocks or even show that you understand it, right? Like they're not going to take an interest in it. The things that I have as passions in my life, I 100%, not 100%, maybe 99, get from the passion experiences I shared with my parents. Like I gave the example of cooking at home. Cooking at home was something my family always did. And my kids are right there alongside me because they see I love it. It's not something that I begrudge, but the things that I begrudge, you can bet my kids are already begrudging. And, it's never becomes more apparent the things that you suck at that when you have kids and they remind you, wow, you're actually quite bad at cleaning things up when you're done. No, I'm not. Okay. Apart from that, so that was sort of our approach to things, was going, what words do we have to change? What processes do we have to slow down? But then it's that's easy enough to say, but then it's putting that over the church and saying, okay, this is our communal buy-in, that we're all going to make that sacrifice, that as an adult, and this is the family analogy, right? The healthy family is one that adapts and changes as life happens. The unhealthy family is the one that never accepts the boyfriend or girlfriend. And so they don't become a husband or wife. Or the unhealthy family is the one that rejects spouses, right? I'm chatting with a friend of ours not long after this, and he was just going, man, when my brothers and I started getting married, our parents didn't do well with it. And they would literally cook food for 5 people when we came over for dinner. They wouldn't acknowledge that the spouses were even there. Like there wasn't enough food for them made. And that's like, how much of that is what we do in church, right? Where it's like, well, yeah, there's kids here, but we're not really going to acknowledge that they're with us. And it's like, well, no, we have to prepare for this. We have to prepare for them being here. And the same thing happens when kids come along, you know, the family that refuses to budge on the formal dinner where you sit at the table, everyone sits down together and stays at the table. That's not going to happen when you have kids in the mix, and mom has to get up to feed the baby, or, you know, diapers have to get changed, or someone's just having a hard time when they have to get up. You have to roll with those punches. And it was looking at our church service and saying, maybe it had become a little too stoic, or a little too fixed for the wrong reasons. That we were, you know, the hills to die on were things like, you know, the words that we said instead of the message behind them. You know, the song that we sing instead of the reason that we sing it. And so we kind of looked at our service and just kind of blew it up and put it back together, saying, Jesus is the piece that won't move. Everything else is up for grabs, and everything else is up for translation. And I don't know, it was a concept you encountered in school. When I was in seminary, I had a Greek exegesis prof who really said, you know, when you're translating stuff, I don't want to hear words that he called stained glass language, right? Like, you know, even a word like grace, he said, I want you to think really hard before you translate grace for grace, because what Paul would have done is describe the entire concept. And so I want you to show when you're translating that you can explain what grace is, instead of just saying grace upon grace, right? That, like, it's God's love that's given for us, that's totally unearned, and we're never able to pay back, right? And so when we say something like that, my kids can go, wow, that's big love. You say the word grace, and most people will just nod, but not really think about or ingest what you've really said. And so, yeah, I don't know. It was a big answer to a very small question.
Sorry. Oh, that's awesome. There's a ton of stuff to sort of tease out in that.
Yeah.
And I just in a community that, like, one of the sort of defining characteristics of our community here in south of Fish Creek area is it's largely second, third generation removed from church. There's somewhere between 20 and 30% of the 250,000 people are part of the sort of the nuns and nuns crowd. But there's a whole other generation of people whose parents were part of that exiting. And, you know, in thinking about the things that church does, in sort of trying to reimagine it sort of in the way you could explain it to a 6-year-old, I think that's a really neat kind of approach, because there are 60 houses on my street. If half of them don't go to church, and half of that half haven't been in church, then there's a barrier to entry even to think about the way we talk about. So it just reminds me of that sort of that idea of cultural distance, and the number of steps removed a person or a family is from church changes the way you have to kind of talk to them. So that idea of slowing down and rethinking things and not kind of rushing into them, like that seems like that seems like it's an important focus point. And so, like, in terms of practical steps, how do you remind yourself to go slower?
Well, I think it's gotten, we will catch ourselves at this point because we're 6 years in. And so in 6 years, you can develop some pretty good patterns to things. But I think it's the reminder of, you know, does it pass through that filter of, does this help? If a new family came, because our context is very similar to your own. And we've often said, you know, if our church isn't accessible to somebody who's never come to church, then we're not being a church. If it's just for us, then okay, great. Then we don't need the church to do that because we're all set. We're not looking to change. We're not looking, you know, like it has to be accessible for the person who's never been before. And so that's kind of the filter. We have a few people in the community that we use as sort of that checkpoint to say, have you ever thought about this before? Or I'll frequently fire things out to our families and say, this was the conversation we had around leading up to our first Easter, was going like, man, this is a humbling thing to think, what if people have never heard Easter before? How do you explain that in a way that doesn't take anything for granted? And the starting point for that was like, how do you explain death to your kids? Because if they don't have a concept of what death is, they're sure as heck not going to get the rest of the Easter story. And so we had a little conversation with a number of our families to say to them, how have you talked to your kids about death before? What are the experiences that they've had with it, right? Because we found half of our families, it seemed to be like all or none. Half had either had a ton of it through like grandparents, even aunts and uncles, and the other half was like, well, we buried a fish once, but they got over it and they asked for a new fish that afternoon, right? And you're like, all right, so big rain. And so we tried to enter in and use the words that they were using, but at the same time, not dodging the biblical truths of it, right? Like when we say, oh, well, they passed away, it's going, well, no, they died. Their body died. And leaning heavily into Paul's writings and even Revelation, where it's like, and their soul's asleep, and just like teaching what the concept is. And it was just a reminder that like at every pass, you need to be ready to explain the concept. That, my mom was a retired kindergarten teacher, and she used to always say, she would lean in every time somebody new was doing the children's message at the church I grew up in, and she would say, they're going to do it. They're going to ask a question they're not prepared for an answer for. And sure enough, like, what do you think of that? Which is a huge, like, you never ask that question of kids, because then somebody will say, I hate it, and it's like, well, you did ask them, and now you have to work with that, right? Like, so, it was that sort of, that posture of like, ask the questions and make the statements that you're prepared to explain. And it takes a lot of bouncing and thinking, and I think I was so thankful for the team that we were a part of. David's work has been phasing out of our church and into the larger presbytery to repeat what we've had happen here in other churches, but it was that constant sounding board of somebody who I knew was step in step with the mission of the church to say, what's a better way of saying that? What's a different way of saying that? And that was the fun part, because his kids are all grown. They're in university and finishing high school. My kids were at the other end of the scale. And so we were able to come at it from, he's got the experience piece down that I don't have, but I've got the context piece that he's moved through. And even from what kids were like, when his kids were little is much different from what it's like for my kids now. And so passing it through that filter and making sure that we always have families at the table to ask them, what are you actually wrestling through? What are some of the things that you've found to be helpful?
So switching gears a little bit here, now we can start to actually dig into some of the questions that I sent you, so rather than put it on the spot all the time. Like you mentioned that Heritage Green is expecting in the next sort of 5 years, 10,000 families to grow. Like that's enormous population growth.
Yeah.
And so like thinking back over the last 6 years, how have you noticed sort of the community change, and how have you noticed like even sort of how was change happening before Family Church replanted, and how is the community changing now?
Yeah, well, I think one of the reasons why the church was struggling as it was is that I think it wasn't adapting to the change that was happening around it. That it was still sort of when the community was brand new, it wasn't called Heritage Green, it was called Satellite City. That was the name of it, I guess, because it was a satellite of the city or whatever. But the people that lived there were this tight-knit group of the first people. And I mean, it's the history repeating itself, right? Of like, we're the special ones because we live here, and they're the ones that knew each other, and they were mostly the people that made up the church. Well, as time went on, they became the minority, and never seemed to really move beyond that. And so what we found was the community, and we had some fantastic community partners to connect with, a research group here in Hamilton, a think tank that we were able to lean into, whose name is escaping me right now. That's awful. Anyway, they helped us see this idea of social poverty that is quite common when you have people living in an area that they didn't grow up in. So they don't have the social supports that most of us grew up with, you know, grandma and grandpa being at most, 15 minutes away. You live in the same city as maybe your siblings do, and so your kids know their cousins well, and all that kind of stuff. But even beyond the nuclear family stuff, you know your neighbors. You trust your neighbors to, if back in the age of block parents, right? Like if you're walking home and you don't feel safe, go up and knock on the door of the house with that sign out front, and they'll keep you safe. Can you ever imagine that idea being pitched today? It's horrible. Yep. And yet I remember as a kid knowing and feeling safe because I could walk past those homes and know that if I needed help, it was there. We don't have that in our communities today. You mentioned, and this is one of the group, they're called Cardis. That's the group that came to mind. They helped us see, this idea that we might live in this connected age, but we're so cut off and so self-dependent for things that our parents and grandparents knew they needed other people for. And whether they needed it, whether they knew really why, they still got all the social benefits of those things, of a relationship of trust and mutual concern. The prime example they gave us was, you look at my street, every single home owns a lawnmower. That makes no sense. None of us have a big enough grass to necessitate our own lawnmower, but we do it because we want to have our own lawnmower. And when it could very easily be a purchase shared between 4 homes, but we don't know them enough to ask. We probably don't trust them enough to take care of it. We like being able to control our own things. And that's hit on a number of different health aspects that all fall under the umbrella of social health. We don't trust, and so we live inherently distrusting. We make decisions financially that put us in a hole. $400 for a lawnmower is something that we go, well, I guess that's a needed expense. No, it could very easily be shared, but we take it on ourselves. And the personal scheduling of like, well, my life is an island, and so I'm going to live within my own island in my own time. Guys next door to us, a few doors down from us, were redoing their driveway. They had a work crew there at 7:30 on Sunday morning, banging away and cutting concrete blocks. I can remember my parents telling the working crew, the roofing crew, when we moved into our house, don't start before this time because that family has a baby. Like, it's just an entirely different mindset of like, well, my life is my island. And so for us as a church, we decided that was the first thing that we were going to think about when we talked about community mission. Are we bringing health to our community, or are we just asking them to come and help us survive? And that idea of social health was appealing in that it's an all-encompassing thing. When you improve someone's social health, when you help them to be known in their community, it has a positive effect on every other aspect of their health. It has a positive effect on their financial health, their mental health, spiritual health, relational health, family health, sexual health. All of those things are in better balance when we are truly known by people and not just living in our own basements, in our own little secured bubbles. And so yeah.
Good. Like one of the cool things about one of the things that is sort of we call it in the church prevenient grace. I don't know how you explain that to a 6-year-old, but like this idea of sort of God preparing the path that we're on. Yeah. And like even like the church's address is 360 Heritage.
Isaac Brock Drive. Yeah.
Brock Drive. See, here in Calgary, everything is like, oh, I'm in Shaughnessy, so it's Shaughnessy Drive. Shaughnessy Road, Shaughnessy Close, Shaughnessy Circle, Shaughnessy.
Yeah.
But yeah, so you guys are at least a little more creative with names, so good for you guys. So like that sort of that idea of that 360 bubble around the church, and I mean, you could have very easily been describing any one of the communities here south of Fish Creek. It's it's almost dizzying as you drive around, and different communities do community in kind of different ways here, but almost every house is a short driveway with a 2-car garage that you drive into with 6 to 8 foot wall fences sort of in the back. You go into your house, you live your life, you go out of your house, you go to work.
Yeah, maybe give the friendly nod, the hello to the neighbor.
One of these, But
do you know that guy's name? No idea. Lived here for 10 years.
And so really this idea of community can feel really isolating, even though you're surrounded by 250,000 people or whatever the population of your town is.
Yeah.
And so that I think that idea of social health is something that's really kind of key. Mm-hmm. Like people talk, we talk a lot as a team here at the Creek about, reaching out to post-social people, and that's a buzzword, but this idea of people who don't join and don't really engage with their neighbors, maybe have their own little circle, but that's where their circle stays. There's no broad, diverse community. And one of the things is that the church has always been and always sort of prided itself on was being that diverse community, Jew and Gentile, male and female, slave and free, people of different races, ethnicities, classes, sexualities, genders, all of that stuff in one place. Yeah. And kind of reckoning with that. And so like how has sort of a focus on as the community of faith, as a faith family, kind of changed or affected that dynamic? How do you think about it? How do you imagine yourselves and in your neighborhood as this kind of diverse family? Like how do you, like, normally families are very homogenous, and as I imagine, knowing Toronto as well as I do, that Heritage Green is not probably all the same ethnicity. It's probably not. There's probably a range of languages spoken and ethnicities represented. And so how do you kind of imagine this sort of family, sort of inclusive family dynamic in a diverse and varied population? Yeah.
Well, I'd say that the quick answer is that we're very young. And as a young church that was specifically designed to be different. And so nobody was really comfortable, right? Mm-hmm. Everybody coming was learning their way. There's nobody that can come in and go, oh yeah, I know this church. Oh yeah, okay. Oh, peace be with you. Oh, and also with you. And yeah. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God, right? Like, so we kind of tried to not throw the baby out with the bathwater, but really create that level playing field of saying, like, anybody coming in, again, it's the whole like doing normal things in a weird way. Like reading a book together is not a weird thing, but when you give a call and answer thing at the beginning that people rhyme off without really thinking about it, and do it in a monotone way that as soon as you get beyond 10 people sounds awful cultish, it starts being weird. And then people are like, no, I don't want to go to church. That's where the people rhyme on and monotone. Like, doing, like, have you ever noticed, like, as soon as you get more than 10 people saying the Lord's Prayer together, it loses its majesty and it becomes this like creepy thing where you're just reciting words and you're not really thinking about what they're meaning. But even in that number of people, even if you are thinking about the meaning, it gets lost in the sea as it starts to level out into one tone, and then it's freaky. And so by kind of taking those things off the table and just, instead of saying it in a phrase that everyone knows, and I'm sure I've settled into patterns. I've been told by some people in my church that there are some things that I will always settle into and rhyme off the same way every time. I think I'm being original. Apparently I'm not. But nobody coming in has experienced our church before. And the joke is you either know in 30 seconds whether you're going to stay or you're going to leave. And we've had people leave partway through the service that have sort of come and been like, oh, this is nice, that's different. And then, after about, 20 minutes, they're like, yeah, no, we're done. We're gone. I'm not sitting through this. And hey, bless you. You know what you're looking for, and it's not us. And then you get others that come in and they're just like, I've never thought church could be something that I could actually engage in. And that's all the glory to God for him bringing us on this path. But it's just that stripping away of like, yeah, you know what? You don't have to be a churched person with a certain amount of knowledge to be able to worship here. You don't have to have the secret lexicon of terms, the cheat sheet of like terms that we're going to refer to that you're not going to get, like, and it can happen. I remember going to seminary and thinking, I'm in pretty good position. I'm a white kid from Scottish descent who's been Presbyterian his whole life. I'm set. And I remember at the newcomers orientation, the number of second years that were throwing around terms like, what was the one? The exegesis. Like it felt like every other word. This was the word that they used. And I was like, I don't have a clue what they're talking about. What am I going to do? And I remember going home and be like, what the heck does that word mean? Well, why don't they just say that? And, and then like, but it was that feeling of like, I'm not going to fit in here because I don't speak the language. And it was one word in a language that I understood. Like, so how much more so do we have to think about that when it's families coming in, and if it's saying, it's simple things, and it's so funny. Like it's instead of saying, okay, kids, go home and talk about this with mom and dad, right? Like that doesn't catch anybody anymore. That doesn't catch everybody anymore. It catches some people, but saying, kids, go home and talk about it with your family that loves you, right? Like that is a term that then hits on family might not be the people they live with, but I bet they have people that they would consider family who love them. If you live with mom, but not dad, mom and dad, grandma, grandpa, cousins, whatever it is, but it's finding the ways to say the things we mean in a way that honors the people that God is bringing to us and the people that might be tuning in because we know about them. We can be that intentional. And I think it's setting aside a lot of our pride. And that was a big piece of this too, was to say, when we make those changes in families, we're setting aside our personal preferences all the time. As a new dad, right? Especially the number of times that you don't do what you want to do is like 90% of my day, right? Like I don't even get to wake up and go to sleep when I want anymore. Like that's how little control I have over my life. But I do it because I love you and I want you to grow, right? We can do that in church. We can set aside our preferences as the mature people at the table, who are the leaders of the church, should be the mature folks, not just the most experienced, but the mature leaders, to say, it actually doesn't matter what I'm looking for in worship. I want to make this accessible for you because you don't know the good news yet. I know that. Doesn't mean we don't do anything that we like, but it's putting that other thing as a priority. The simple example we give is, family movie night. I would love to sit down and watch Braveheart with my twins who are 3, but that would be entirely irresponsible for me as a dad. It would be inappropriate. There'd be stuff they wouldn't get, and potentially traumatizing. But I can tell you, I've watched an awful lot of Peppa Pig. Right? And so as a church, we need to recognize when our kids are with us, maybe it's not even the Braveheart example, maybe it'd be something like Casablanca, which is, again, maybe not on there'd just be a ton they wouldn't get. And they wouldn't get why it's special. They wouldn't get why it's important. They wouldn't get why it's a great movie. And so looking at that and going like, how much of our time in church are we expecting our kids to get stuff that's important to us without explaining why, or even giving them a taste of what they can relate to get them on the way there. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. And again, and that's such a good like mindset, worldview piece to think about, like in trying to reach out to friends, neighbors, coworkers who are probably part of the, probably not part of the 10 to 15% of Canadians who attend church regularly.
Yeah.
That's like that kind of tabula rasa, that kind of blank slate approach to church changes the way you talk, changes the way you kind of think about outreach. And I mean, I know it's changed the way that you thought about connecting during COVID, especially. You had, I know you had a book recently come out focused on like some of what you were talking about earlier with trying to introduce the topic of grief and sometimes I'm sad. I think the title, Sometimes I'm Sad Inside.
Sometimes I feel sad inside. Yeah. That's a great plug. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. We'll make sure we'll put a link to it in the description of the video down below. But that that idea of really thinking through what does it mean to build a relationship with kids, families, young adults, older adults during a season like COVID, where you and I can sit down on Zoom and we can have a chat and it's great and we can meaningfully connect this way. Yep. The number of families that I talk to who are feeling just absolutely burnt out with screen time and they're doing school online, they're playing video games online, they are, all of their social interactions.
Anything and everything.
I talked to a family recently that was, said if I have to be on one more Zoom call, I'm done. And I totally understand, which is why I think some of the things that Family Church and you were doing with families in this season was really neat, because it really kind of engaged, like you would host semi-regular or regular like art classes, drawing. Yeah. You would teach them how to draw Spider-Man or Mickey Mouse. Or, I mean, I'm sure it was a million different things, but using kind of your own capacity as an artist to kind of rather than just sitting here and having a conversation which is mind-numbingly boring for a 6, 8, 10, 35-year-old. But that sort of that idea of finding something practical and tangible that you can do with people. And so that this sort of idea of building relationships by doing things together is something that I think is sort of quintessential to families. Families are known. Families do things together. It's kind of what families do. And so how have you found it possible to continue growing relationships with families during a time when families are either done with technology and done with connecting in a face-to-face way and are really looking for real connection? But that's not an option.
Totally.
I guess just trying to think about, COVID is a great analogy for our kind of post-social world. We've realized that our methodology for connecting with people, our sense of connectedness is kind of broken. And one of the things you've done really well is continuing to build meaningful connections through activities that cover a range of people. And so looking back on COVID and looking forward to post-COVID, how has sort of your focus on building relationships evolved?
That's a great question. I think you're welcome. I think one of the main things has been, I'm eternally thankful that God's called me to a ministry that I can relate to. And so that's key. But if that's not you, not you per se, but anyone who's listening in or watching, that to make sure that you have those voices in your ear, to make sure that what you're doing is actually what people need and not just something that you think they need. And then also recognizing, and so that's from the practical piece. And so the piece that we're always asking ourselves in these COVID times is like, how can we help? Like that's it's help. Like it's not be the solution. Like I fully get that, so I do you said a half-hour art time on Wednesdays, and I do a story time on Fridays, and on Tuesday evenings we do a bedtime story piece. And those are some of them, a mix of pre-recorded and live things. But they're just like, can I take a half-hour stress off you? Right? Like, can I help for half an hour? Or if you're catching up late, can you plop your kid down and they can watch an hour or 2 hours worth of drawing videos? Like, that's cool. Or they can just sit and stare out the window and listen to me read a story because they maybe know my voice. Like, can I help? And I think that's just sort of that approach to things. But also it's releasing myself from well, not everybody showed up. What are we going to do? Right? Like, and we've been there on a Sunday morning where you walk in and you're like, wow, there's like not as many people here. I really wish it wasn't a nice day out. Right? Or it's like you wake up in the morning and you're like, it's snowing. Great. So there's not going to be that many people here. But it's going, and in some ways, the online piece was something that God had really brought to us before we even arrived at this COVID time, because it was saying, look, you got to do church in a way that your families can get into. And so we've been live streaming for years because, young families, like my family's a perfect example. If my wife wasn't married to a pastor, I think we'd probably be in church once every couple of months because of how often a child is sick. And that's as a whole family.
Yep.
It's a special day when all 6 of us are at church together and somebody isn't sick. Like, the people that are saying that the kids aren't a factor in this COVID thing don't have kids. Kids spread disease better than playgrounds.
Oh my God,
like,
yes.
We have saved so much money on Advil and Tylenol during this COVID time because my kids have been healthy for 4 months. 4 months. It's just them.
Yep.
There's no outside germs or bugs coming. It's incredible. And so, of course we had to live stream so that families could still worship even though they weren't there. And so it was pretty cool to be able to, we changed some things around, but we hit the ground running when this thing started because it was going, well, now we're all in this boat together, right? Like, before where it was like, we'd always wave, hi to the so-and-so family, hope so-and-so's feeling better today. When we knew about it, we could say that and we could engage with them that way. And now it's going, that's where all of us are. And it's just that idea of partnering with people, lowering your expectation and just getting that, like, the first thing is just surviving. And I think that's, not in any way to limit or play down what people might be experiencing, because it's one of the truer things that have been said about this virus situation has been that we might all be in the storm together, but we're not experiencing it the same way. My wife and I are both fully employed through this. That's not the reality for everybody. We have 4 kids. That's also not the reality for everybody. So we'll call that a wash, right? Okay, yes, we're dual income, but we're buying 4 things of milk a week because we have 4 kids. And my evenings, I took a week off not too long ago, and someone was asking me, how was your vacation? And I said, well, was it restful? And I said, well, it was nice to not work. But other than that, like, was it restful? No, it wasn't restful. It's never restful. Like, did I laugh a lot? Yes. Did I scream a lot? Yeah. Did our food bill go up? Yes. Like, so it's just meeting families where they're at. And I think that's what people want, is they don't want to be told, like, and this is the important thing. As a church, do we have a special message to tell them? Absolutely we do. And do I want every family in this community to know Jesus as their Lord? Absolutely I do. I'm not going to get the place to talk to them about that if I don't first meet them where they are. And that idea of social poverty is the idea that, everybody wants to be known, right? Like you talked about that. What was the term you used? The
post-social.
Post-social. That idea of like, we don't participate. Doesn't mean they can't or that they won't. It's that their default is to not. And the reason is because of all the other social things that are in play. They don't want to get involved in stuff because it's going to mean getting to know new people. They don't like meeting new people because they don't know them yet, right? Like, they don't want to spend money because they're going to get drawn into a deeper commitment. They're going to be asked to give to something. All of, the reasons go on and on and on. And we often quit before we even start because of those struggles. But it's going, if the first thing is I can say, I know you, or at least I know of you before I know you, and I'm with you in the things that you're wrestling with, the number of people that I love, I'm going to miss when I don't have any kids in kindergarten anymore, because I love every day, 5 days a week, I have a chance to chat with parents in our community at the fence as we joke about how I'm the late parent again, and how, so-and-so, what was the fight today? Apparently one pink boot was not enough and we needed to have another, that's just real life for them. And the cool thing is, with having 4 kids, is I've been a part of, next year we will be part of like a different group of parents every time. Some of them are the same and some of them are new. And I love that when we do an event as a church and people put that 2 and 2 together and they're like, oh, you're the pastor there. That it's like they've known me as a parent in the community first, and then learn the pastor piece. But if our lead is, do you want to come to my church? It's like, no, that's weird. Why would you say that? But to say, life sucks. How are you getting through? We're having some people over to have hot dogs. Do you want to come? Like those no pressure things to just meet people where they are in life, go tremendously long. And in these COVID days, some of it is just resigning to the reality that, would I prefer my kids had less screen time? Yeah. And I know we'll get back to that. But right now, if they want to talk with their friends that they haven't seen in 4 months, I'm going to have them talk with their kids for 4 months, because their little hearts are hurting and they don't even know why, and in the same way that if my wife and I've probably played more video games in the last 4 months after my kids have gone to bed, because it's a way I can chat with my younger brother who's having a hard time on his own. He's not married, doesn't have kids, but we can chat together and play hockey online. And my wife knows how important that is for me to connect with him, to have that relaxing time. And so we change things and we roll with where we're at in order to meet people with where they are.
That's such a good, to me, that's a perfect thing. That's such a perfect takeaway for this. This idea of meeting people where they are is so much the heart, my heart for the ministry here at the Creek, and I know it's a passion that you share, and so thank you so much, Alex, for being willing to share your wisdom with us, and time that I know is doubly precious. But thank you so much for being here today and your wisdom. I see you got a copy of your book behind you there. Do you want to grab it and we can tell people where to find it?
Yes. So it is, in terms of meeting people where they are. This is a book that we wrote just because, as a pastor, that was the thing that families seem to universally encounter in life, was that eventually somebody that they knew would die. And there's a lot of bad advice that gets kicked around when someone dies, well-meaning, but God needed another angel in heaven, and it's going, wow, that's awful of God to do that. So God killed grandma because he needed another angel. Like, wow. Or, well, God had his reasons, and that is a horrible thing to say to a couple who've lost or miscarried or something. But so the idea of coming where people are at was that, my wife is a social worker, and so I have a lot of benefit in that regard in terms of how to deal with emotions and stuff like that, and just trying to meet people with where they're at in terms of saying, kids have big feelings, and I need them to know that God is there with them. God doesn't say, don't be sad. God doesn't say, this will last forever, but it's an okay season to go through, and it won't last forever. But the book is available. I'll give you the Facebook link. People, it's cheaper to get it from me. Amazon had a really weird thing about the cost that it would have to be through there. So they can contact me through the Facebook page, and I'd be happy to get them a copy. But it is available on Amazon if you want to go that route. And yeah, thanks, man. This has been awesome to spend this time with you. I'm excited to always hear about how things are going at the creek, and it's exciting to see it continue to grow.
Yeah, awesome. Well, yeah, I mean, thank you so much. And for now, everybody that's watching, take care of yourselves and take care of each other. And all the best.
Take care.